You've probably heard of the Breakers, the largest and most famous of America's Gilded Age Newport mansions. But what many people don't realize is that this home's massive scale and over-the-top opulence were fueled by an inter-family rivalry between two very determined women, Alice and Alva, the wives of two Vanderbilt brothers, each seeking to establish social supremacy and becoming the Mrs. Vanderbilt. What began as a family power play became one of the most ambitious homes ever built in America, a true expression of Gilded Age architecture and design without limits, meant to project a very deliberate vision of American royalty to the world. Today, we're stepping inside the Breakers, exploring the intention behind each space, the design decisions that helped shape it, and the details that most people walk right past. We'll also be learning about the Vanderbilt family who created this home and the woman who knew how to quietly strategize and establish social dominance when no one saw it coming. Hi, I'm Allie, and welcome back to Fab Little Dish, where we celebrate vintage homes, historic interiors, and the stories that keep those places alive. If you love historic house tours, hit that thumbs up button. Now let's head back to Newport, Rhode Island, and discover another side of the Breakers together. If one house could be said to capture the spirit and the extravagant abandon that defined Newport during the Gilded Age, it would have to be the Breakers. Set on roughly 13 acres, the Breakers rises 4 stories high above the cliffs of the Atlantic. At nearly 125,000 square feet, it contains 70 rooms, 28 fireplaces, 20 bathrooms, 2 grand staircases, and even 2 original elevators. This house was engineered on a scale that barely seemed imaginable in the 1890s. Not to mention the interiors. The rooms housed artworks purchased from some of the greatest palaces across Europe. Everything here was meant to surpass what had come before it. In many ways, the Breakers was a direct response to Marble House, bigger, bolder, and more commanding. These Gilded Age homes were insanely expensive to maintain, and once they started to disappear, we were losing chapters of design history that can never be recreated. That's what makes the Breakers, Marble House, and others like it so special. It's a snapshot of a moment when architects, decorators, designers, and craftspeople were pushing materials, scale, and ornamentation as far as they possibly could, when money truly was no object. And when America, eager to assert itself on the world stage, built its own castles and palaces. Mark Twain famously coined the term the Gilded Age, and it wasn't meant as a compliment. Beneath the glittering surface was deep economic inequality and social imbalance, and as we've talked about in many of our other elaborate house tours, these families lived complicated lives, and once taxes and shifting values caught up, homes like this proved to be unsustainable, which is exactly why walking through the Breakers today feels incredibly special. We're looking at a moment in design history that will never be recreated. The story of the Breakers begins with one of the most powerful families in American history, the Vanderbilts. The mansion was built between 1893 and 1895 for Cornelius Vanderbilt II, grandson of Cornelius Commodore Vanderbilt, the railroad and steamship tycoon who shaped American industry and made one of the greatest fortunes the country had ever seen. His son Cornelius II met his wife Alice Gwen Vanderbilt in Sunday school. Alice was much more quiet and reserved compared to the social queen of the Vanderbilts, Alva. Cornelius II and his wife Alice purchased the Breakers in 1885 as their summer home in Newport, where many of New York's elite social circles were deciding to spend their summers. But the original Breakers, which was made of mostly wood, burned down in 1892, the same year Marble House was completed and made its debut, along with Alva, into Newport society. Leading up to this, Alice was in constant competition with the rest of elite society, especially Alva. Now with an excuse to create the Breakers from scratch, Alice wasn't going to let this opportunity for social dominance pass her by. The Breakers was going to become her statement piece, her chance to become the Mrs. Vanderbilt and dominate Newport society. Cornelius and Alice hired Richard Morris Hunt, who helped shape the look of the Gilded Age, and who was also the same architect who worked closely with Alva Vanderbilt in creating the Marble House. Richard Morris Hunt was given 3 conditions to meet when recreating the Breakers. It had to be fireproof, completed quickly, and it had to be the grandest home in Newport. And that's exactly what was done. Fireproof materials were used: stone, steel, marble, and concrete. No wood framing, no risks. They wanted a home that would be grand, durable, and impossible to ignore. And today, Newport has yet to see a larger home than the Breakers. Hunt modeled the exterior after 16th century Italian Renaissance palazzos. The facade feels European, almost royal, which is very intentional. The outside might have been Hunt's vision, but on the inside, the soul of the home came from Alice Vanderbilt. She wasn't just approving swatches, she was deeply involved in the design process. She selected materials, room schemes, color palettes, and worked closely with Hunt and the Parisian design firm Jules Allard & Sons. Allard brought in teams of European craftsmen who carved, gilded, plastered, and hand-painted the rooms on site. Alice coordinated all of this. She truly was quietly strategizing plans to dominate Newport society. For 2 years, all of Newport buzzed about the new Vanderbilt estate. In August 1895, they hosted the coming out ball for their daughter, Gertrude, which also served as the formal introduction of the Breakers to Newport society. As soon as you step inside the Breakers, you feel small, and that's not an accident. The Great Hall stands at 50 feet wide, 50 feet long, and a soaring 50 feet high, serving as the central stage of the home. In keeping with Hunt's vision of the Breakers as an Italian Renaissance palace, this open hall was inspired by an outdoor courtyard, brought indoors and monumentalized. The ceiling is painted with a windswept sky, framed by deep coffered plasterwork, modeled after the ceilings of Italian Renaissance palaces. Jules Allard's craftsmen sculpted every panel by hand, layering classical ornamentation, gilded details, and mythological motifs, and if you look closely, you'll even spot subtle Vanderbilt crests tucked into the detailing. Acorns, the symbol of the Vanderbilt family, representing strength and longevity, quiet reminders of who this palace was built for. The walls are wrapped in stone and marble from all over the world. Alabaster, rose-colored, deep green, and onyx marble. The materials were statements in themselves. The chandeliers are breathtaking and extraordinary in scale, gilded, heavy, and wired for both gas and electricity, an emerging technology at the time. These fixtures are so heavy that they're actually bolted into the steel framework of the house itself to make sure they stay in place. And then there's the staircase, this sweeping sculptural presence that anchors the whole room. The balustrade and carved stonework echo Italian palazzo architecture, but on a scale that feels almost theatrical. What I love most, though, is how the room is designed to control your eye. The staircase pulls you up, the marble pulls you across, the ceiling pulls you right back, everything choreographed to overwhelm, impress, and create that ultimate first impression that the Vanderbilts wanted guests to feel the moment they stepped through the door. At the landing, you'll see Cornelius Vanderbilt II's portrait, and right beneath it sits something really beautiful, an Italian Renaissance dowry chest, carved, gilded, and richly detailed. Pieces like this were traditionally given to brides and filled with fine linens or clothing. It anchors the space with a sense of lineage. And as we head under the stairs, just look at this skylight. This incredible sheet of light filtering down from the very top of the house creates such a magical glow. What makes this even more special is that the skylight actually came from the Vanderbilt's mansion in New York City and was brought here when that home was demolished. It's one of the few surviving pieces of their earlier life, and it brings a softness to the entire grandeur of the space. Dinner parties were the heartbeat of the summer season here in Newport, the moment when a society hostess could truly shine, and this Beaux Arts style dining room was the perfect place for Alice Vanderbilt to do just that. The 2-story dining room covers 2,400 square feet and is flanked by 12 enormous rose alabaster columns, topped with gilded bronze capitals. The carved oak dining table comfortably seated up to 34 guests. Dinner here wasn't just a meal, it was a full-scale event. Every detail, the silver, china, lighting, everything was choreographed to create an experience. Above is a huge vaulted ceiling adorned with a painting of Aurora, the Roman goddess of dawn, surrounded by 22-karat gold leaf detailing that picks up the light from the chandeliers below. Two 12-foot baccarat crystal chandeliers illuminated the room as guests enjoyed an 8 to 10 course dinner. As the sun set, it would hit the hand-cut crystal from France and throw prisms of color around the room and across the entire table, which must have made the experience that much more theatrical. And those alabaster marble columns dividing the space, each one is carved from a single piece of marble, which makes these that much more impressive because they must have been a nightmare to install. The massive fireplace grounds the room, acting as a visual anchor for all of the detailed exquisiteness surrounding it. Everything about this space is about ceremony, symmetry, and showing what the finest craftsmanship in the world looked like at the turn of the century. This room wasn't built just to impress. It was designed to be remembered. This is the billiards room, and the theme here is meant to mimic the sea. Richard Morris Hunt wanted the room to feel like in an ancient Roman style, and it honestly gives me vibes from Pompeii's bathhouses. The walls are lined in Italian marble, and mixed into the stone are pieces of alabaster and semi-precious minerals that give the surface a soft, luminous quality. When the light hits it, it almost looks like water moving across. Below that, the floor is covered in hand-laid mosaic tile, each tile piece hand-set by a skilled craftsman. Tucked under the main staircase is this little grotto, one of the most whimsical nooks of the house. You'll see carved dolphins, sea creatures, and this huge reflective mirror that bounces the light from the skylight above, so the whole space shimmers like water. This is the breakfast room, and it's one of the few spaces in the home that truly feels intimate. It's decorated in soft Louis XV style, the kind of room meant for intimate family meals rather than grand entertaining. And this table is a bit of a survivor piece. It actually came from the original breakers, the one that was burned in 1892. It's one of the very few objects that made it through the fire. At the far end of the Great Hall is the Grand Arcade, anchored by this towering fireplace. Above you, the ceiling shifts into a barrel vault, which gives the whole space a long, cathedral-like sweep that pulls your eye toward the ocean-facing windows. Above the doorway, we see cherubs, holding a sledgehammer and a railroad spike, a subtle but meaningful reference to the Vanderbilt legacy. The entire arcade acts as a bridge between the public grandeur of the Great Hall and the private rooms beyond it. This gorgeous French and Italian Renaissance-style room faces the east, providing sweeping views of the ocean. It was used by the family to sit in and have conversations throughout the day. Designed by the same French interior designer who helped Alva design Marble House, Jules Allard. The walls are lined with original platinum leaf, which was more expensive and more rare than gold at the time. It gives the room this gorgeous, luminous glow. On one side of the room is an original John Singer Sargent portrait of Cornelius Vanderbilt II. And directly across from him is his daughter, Gladys Vanderbilt. She's the one who eventually inherited the breakers and later transferred it to the Preservation Society, which is why we're able to walk through these spaces today. It's crazy to think that this house was built in just 2 years, and a big reason for that is because it was actually being decorated as it was being built. This room was actually crafted in France, shipped here, and assembled piece by piece right in this space. Alva Vanderbilt also did this at the Marble House, so it was just a way of speeding up the completion process of a home at the time, especially if you had the means to do so. When you think about the process that it must have taken for a home like this to be designed and constructed at the same time, that process alone is extravagantness, and the fact that it was all done in 2 years continues to blow my mind as I walk through each of these spaces. And we have here another spectacular fireplace, gilded bronze detail, frame panels of Campan marble. This wasn't a room meant to dazzle a crowd, it was meant to hold your attention quietly. The music room is one of the most breathtaking spaces in the entire home. This room was modeled after the Paris Opera House, so you're seeing true Beaux Arts design up close and personal here. Over-the-top ornamentation used to shape how you move through the room. The ceiling in the music room is almost subdued and restrained, so you can take everything else surrounding it in. The walls are inlaid with white onyx, which is incredibly rare. To see it used at this scale is almost visually overwhelming. It's on the pilasters, the wall panels, and even carries up to the ceiling coffers. If you look closely, you'll notice musical motifs woven into the panels, lyres, scrolls, and ornamental details that all reinforce the purpose of the room. There are dozens of crystals that hang from the light, and when the sunlight hits these and bounces off the mirrors, an endless sparkle is created throughout the space. And for all of the HBO Gilded Age fans, this is the ballroom of the Russell family's palatial Fifth Avenue mansion. The fireplace is another standout. It's inlaid with semi-precious stones chosen specifically for how they catch the light, so the mantle actually shifts in color throughout the day, creating a luminous glow. Above you are two massive baccarat chandeliers, each one draped in cut crystals. And of course, anchoring the space is the Steinway piano, placed exactly here for a reason, where it would have had the best acoustics. Mr. Vanderbilt played the violin in here, and Mrs. Vanderbilt played the piano. When lavish parties weren't being thrown, this was a favorite space for the family to all play music with each other. Everything in here was designed to be very theatrical and glamorous. You can picture guests gathering for a private concert, the chandeliers shimmering overhead, the sound bouncing off the onyx walls, and the entire room working together the way only great Beaux Arts interiors can. You might even forget that you're in Newport, Rhode Island, and just pretend for a moment that you're in Paris. And as we enter from the music room, the pocket doors open into a small transitional space that mirrors the music room, but with a darker and more masculine tone. Same motifs, same finishes, almost like you're moving from one chapter of a story to the next. The library is a complete shift in mood, more laid back, yet still refined in its Renaissance revival style. The house moves from feminine and theatrical to something quieter and more masculine, and that back and forth balance in style is one of the things I love most about the Breakers. The coffered ceiling immediately catches your eye. The fine craftsmanship is just striking. The gilded wood panels have gold leaf pressed into the wood in a stippled pattern to make it actually look like leather, and it does. The wide green border just above the ceiling is Spanish leather embossed in gold. And then there's the fireplace, a 500-year-old carved limestone mantel. A place designed for reflection and for showing that the Vanderbilts valued knowledge and European traditions just as much as making a spectacle of it all. And now we step into the room of the youngest Vanderbilt daughter, Gladys, who would later become Countess Szechenyi. Designed by Ogden Codman Jr., the decorator famous for his restrained classical style, Gladys's bedroom is intentionally softer and more personal than the rooms belonging to her parents. The walls are covered in pale patterned silk, framed by tall, elegant panel moldings that stretch nearly to the ceiling. Just look at this hidden door in the wall. You'll see a lot of these throughout the second floor, where rooms connect to one another. It really reminds me of the Palace of Versailles and all of the hidden doors throughout the spaces there. The bedroom walls are covered in silk, and the furnishings are in the Louis XV style. Remember, Gladys is the one who leased the Breakers to the Preservation Society for just $1 before eventually donating it outright. She's the reason why we're walking through here today. Look at this beautiful French screen beside the bed. It's one of my favorite objects in the room, a folding changing screen filled with portraits of young women from the era. It feels sentimental and almost like a glimpse into Gladys's private world. The beauty is simply in the proportions, the calm symmetry, and the gentle glow of the sconces along the walls. And Gladys's adjoining bathroom is light and airy, white glazed tiles, pale marble, nickel fixtures, and a deep porcelain tub set into an alcove. For the 1890s, this was super modern, clean, bright, and surprisingly contemporary feeling for the time. This was meant as a private, cozy little retreat for Gladys, and it really feels like it in here. Next is Cornelius Vanderbilt II's bedroom. And again, it's noticeably restrained compared to everything else we've been looking at. Pale paneled walls, rich woods, marble top tables, and brass sconces wash everything in warm light. The palette is darker in here, furnishings are more masculine, and the overall mood is just calm. It's an elegant suite, but much more straightforward and functional than theatrical. Mr. Vanderbilt only enjoyed the Breakers for one healthy summer before suffering a stroke in 1896 and then fell ill until his death in 1899. And then off to the side here is his changing room, where most of his day-to-day dressing and grooming would have happened before stepping back into the formality of the house. The real showpiece here is his bathroom. The tub is carved from a single block of marble, and designed after a Roman sarcophagus with 4 separate taps, hot and cold water and hot and cold salt water pumped in directly from the Atlantic Ocean. This was incredibly state-of-the-art for the time. And because the marble was so thick, it had to be filled and drained several times before actually staying warm enough for someone to step in. And here is Mrs. Alice Vanderbilt's bedroom. The family bedrooms we've just seen were quiet and understated, but here everything is starting to elevate again. This is Louis XVI style. Ogden Codman designed this suite the way an 18th century French decorator would have. Light-colored furnishings, painted woods, floral upholstery, and balanced symmetry. Simply designed for a queen. The oval shape of the room is a result of where we're standing, which is directly above the music room, so the architecture is echoing the curve of the grand space below. The palette is lovely and feminine, with pale pinks, powdery greens, warm creams. Even the placement of the bed, chairs, stools, and the vanity table feels intentionally graceful. Her bedroom is Louis XVI style, featuring an oval shape, soft colors in light ivory and cream, more straight lines on the furniture, and other little neoclassical details throughout. The oval shape of the room is a result of where we're standing. The chairs, especially this one with the musical motifs woven into the fabric, feels like something Marie Antoinette would have chosen for her very own Petit Crayon. The room just feels both airy and refined. This was Alice Vanderbilt's personal and private space until her death in 1934. And you can feel that this room was meant to be comfortable, but elegant, still proudly saying that this is the matriarch of the house's bedroom. Through the doorway is Mrs. Vanderbilt's dressing room, where her gowns, jewels, gloves, and accessories would have been laid out and arranged for her. This suite, bedroom, and dressing room together formed her private retreat within the house. Women in Newport could change up to 7 times throughout a summer day. That would be exhausting, which is why there's also a little bed right here. Mrs. Vanderbilt would use this for a quick afternoon nap so she could leave her bedroom immaculate. Again, Louis XVI in style, with the fabric pattern from the bedroom furniture being brought onto the walls right in here. Such a great way to flow one room's design seamlessly into another. And now we're stepping into my favorite room on the second floor, Miss Gertrude Vanderbilt's room. Gertrude was the 4th of the Vanderbilt children, and this was the home where she was introduced into high society at age 19. In 1896, she was actually married here at the Breakers, just a year after it was completed, which was one of the most anticipated social events in Gilded Age Newport. She would marry Harry Payne Whitney, a union that gave her security but very little creative freedom. And instead of becoming a traditional society hostess, Gertrude quietly carved out a life that looked very different than what was expected from her. Years later, she became a sculptor, a patron of the arts, and eventually the founder of the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, and the aunt at the very center of a famous child custody battle for Gloria Vanderbilt, years later. But here, she was simply a young woman growing up in Newport. The first thing I noticed is this gorgeous wallpaper. It's absolutely explosive, climbing roses and deep pinks and soft blush tones. Everything here is louder, but it's still elegant, reflecting Gertrude's more contemporary taste as she came into adulthood. The furniture is still in that French 18th century style, but the palette transforms everything. The matching floral upholstery, the pink coverlet, the chairs with the sweeping arms, the whole room feels much more expressive, romantic, and surprisingly forward for the time. Her portrait at the young age of 5 sits near the bed, painted by the Spanish artist Madrazo. Across the room is another portrait of her as an adult, looking directly out at the viewer, and she has a confidence that hints at the creative life that she would build for herself. Right off the bedrooms is the second-floor loggia, a long open-air balcony overlooking the Atlantic. The tiled floors, tall arches, and simple ceiling details make it one of the calmest spots upstairs, yet the view still makes it feel grand. This space wasn't just meant for relaxing, it also worked as natural air circulation for the home. During the summers, the ocean breeze would flow straight through here and cool the entire second floor. It's easy to picture the family stepping out for fresh air or pausing here just to take in these incredible views. This is the guest bedroom, and it's much more elaborate than the family's private rooms because this is the space that was meant to impress up here. In a house like the Breakers, hosting was a performance as well, and the guest suite gave the Vanderbilts a chance to show off their taste and the latest design trends. Ogden Codman decorated this room in the late 1890s using his newer approach, 18th century French inspiration with light colors and clean neoclassical lines. The pale green wall panels are original and have never been touched. They're a perfect example of Codman's French-influenced style. The carved molding, tall mirrored fireplace, and delicate painted screen all reinforce that refined late 19th century French look. Everything in here feels elegant but intentional, from the striped upholstery to the soft drapery and accents of marble throughout. This was the room where guests would stay, and the Vanderbilts wanted to make an impression here as well. And I would say that it absolutely does just that. As we climb the grand staircase, we feel the legacy of the family who once called this place home. The first thing your eye goes to is the portrait of Alice Vanderbilt, the matriarch of this house. And above her hangs a Flemish tapestry depicting Alexander the Great. Across the landing, you'll see two more important portraits. One is of Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt, who built the initial fortune of the family. Opposite him is his son William Henry Vanderbilt, who didn't just inherit the empire, he doubled it. These two portraits facing one another is like a dialogue between ambition and expansion, exactly the spirit this house was built on. And here's a little behind-the-scenes space. The service stairwell. Even here, the Vanderbilts didn't skimp. It's simple compared to the public rooms, but the craftsmanship here is just gorgeous. Over 40 servants were required to support this opulent world, supervised by a head butler, chef, housekeeper, and head coachman. In 1895, there were over 2,000 servants in Newport, many of them just having arrived as newly arrived immigrants in America. Working in a grand Gilded Age house like this was their stepping stone to the American dream. But working in this one especially meant something a little more because it was the grandest of all of the Newport estates. The kitchen at the Breakers was designed to be fireproof, so the kitchen sits in a separate wing. Everything built with functionality and safety in mind. Tiled walls, stone surfaces, and heavy metal equipment. The centerpiece is this original 21-foot cast iron range. There aren't any burners on here. The whole cast iron surface heats up like a huge griddle. This was industrial scale cooking at its finest, powerful enough to prepare meals for dozens of guests and a staff during peak summer entertaining. Next is the Butler's Pantry, and you can tell this area must have been very busy when entertaining was taking place. This is where the food was plated and staged before moving into the dining room. Inside here you see a gas-heated warming box used to keep dishes hot before serving. Again, something very advanced for the time. Also, here is the original call box that servants used to track which room needed whose attention. The cabinets here are filled with original china. Each Vanderbilt family had their own china. But when they would leave for the summer or for out of town, they would take their silver with them. But here is the built-in safe for the Tiffany silver. It's one of the best preserved service areas in the house, and it shows the scale of proportions behind those glamorous dinners, and it gives us a little sneak peek of what it must have been like as those grand elaborate dinners were taking place. After her husband Cornelius Vanderbilt II died from a stroke in 1899, Alice Vanderbilt inherited the 70-room cottage and maintained it as a private family residence for 35 years until her death in 1934. She never remarried, and she never hosted the elaborate parties that once defined life here at the Breakers. Unlike her husband, who loved entertaining and hosting, Alice was always much more reserved. The house shifted with her. It became more quiet and much more private. For decades, the Breakers was no longer a stage. It was her home. And during that time, Alice quietly maintained the Vanderbilt legacy, supporting charitable and religious causes until her death. In many ways, the ambition behind the Breakers worked. Alice achieved exactly what she set out to do. She put her family at the top of the Vanderbilt dynasty, becoming the undisputed matriarch of the family and a central pillar in Newport society, a proud position she would hold for the rest of her life. But I did leave wondering if it was all worth it. If Alice could go back and recreate the Breakers for a third time, would she have done it the same way again? I can't help thinking that she wouldn't have. But I'm curious what you all think. Let me know in the comments below. Standing here and trying to take all of this opulence in, space after space after space, as we walk throughout the entire home, it does make you pause at the end. These grand Gilded Age palaces came at a cost. The constant pressure to maintain status, the relentless competition, the stark inequalities that existed just beyond each set of gates, often ignored but ever present. Homes like these, especially the Breakers, required enormous physical, financial, and emotional labor to sustain. The scale alone demanded constant oversight, endless decision-making, and a kind of intensity that never really turned off. As breathtaking as these homes are, they're also reminders that excess, no matter how beautiful, is never without consequence. I hope you enjoyed this tour of the Breakers. Make sure to hit thumbs up, subscribe for weekly house tours, and leave me a comment letting me know what you thought of this week's episode. Until next time, my friends, keep enjoying the beauty of vintage home. Au revoir.